Hi and welcome to the video on device groups. Chosen device groups because I ran a poll recently and people were choosing between either device groups or HIP profiles, which are host information profiles, and Palo Alto firewalls. So we're going to get into device groups today because that one won. I was actually quite pleasantly surprised that people voted. It was actually quite nice. So let's get into it. Quick word first, if you could like and subscribe, that would be brilliant. It does help, and the more sort of likes and subscribers that we get, the easier it's going to be to continue on and make more and more videos, and look to expand to like the community as well, so we can all start discussing Palo configuration things and have a mechanism by which we can request videos, or if somebody needs help with something, maybe we could put together a short video just to help that person and do it sort of fairly quickly. However, that's for the future. So device groups. Device groups are logical containers. That's the best way and easiest way of looking at them. And they are primarily concerned with the policies and objects here. Obviously the templates and network and devices we discussed before. And we can see the parity between the device groups and the templates if we look at a standalone firewall. So the policies and objects comes under the device groups, as we saw, and then the networking device comes under the templates. So how does that work? So if I was to look at the policies on this panorama, I've got the shared policies. So shared is the top of the device group chain, as we can see, so at the top now, and then underneath we've got a nested HA test group. Okay, so if we go here to shared, we've got nothing in shared. If I go to the HA test group, we've got our rules. Now, that means essentially that the HA test group, which is bizarrely named, I'll admit that, the HA test group, that's going to inherit anything we put in shared. So in this particular instance, if we were to put a rule in shared that was, I don't know, let's say for instance we wanted to block SSH. And this is going to be inherited by all child groups. Okay. So if we wanted to block SSH, as I say, we would put this in our shared, and we wanted to block that across our entire estate. So every device group underneath this would then inherit this. Okay, so, and we want, let's go with any zone. We want to make sure that no SSH gets out anywhere, any zone. The application is going to be SSH. And for the sake of argument, we're going to go with SSH tunnel as well. We're going to do application defaults, or we'll go with any, as we've discussed before. When we're blocking things, go for any, because then it's going to look for that application across anything, as opposed to it being blocked just on its application defaults. And then we're going to drop this one. We'll drop this one so it's silently dropped. Okay, so we've now created our policy in shared, and as we can see, it's at the top of the tree. So when we go to HA test group policies, we'll be able to see now that our block SSH is inherited. So the location is where we're looking for this information. So the location is shared, as we can see, and the rest of the rules, location is actually in this particular device group. Again, we can do this with post rules. So in post rules, if we wanted to allow HTTP, because I can't think of anything else at the minute. So allow HTTP. Okay, any to any, and we'll talk about the how we get those drop downs and everything to work now. So we're going to have web browsing, which is there. Web browsing is HTTP traffic. We only want it to happen on application default, so that's going to be port 80, and we're going to allow it. Okay, so now we know that if we look at our rule base for the firewall, we know that that's in our post rules there. Sorry, and this is an ideal thing here now. So this is in the post rule here, but I've accidentally put it in the HA test group. So what you can do is you can select the rule, and we can say we want to move it to a different rule base or device group. Well, where we want to move it to is the shared device group. It's not really a device group, it's just a shared group. And we want to put it in the post rule base, and we want it to go in to the bottom. So we want to make sure that any traffic that falls through all of our rules, at the very least, for whatever reason, we need them to have HTTP capability, so that's what we're going to do. Okay, so not a lot seems to have happened here, but if I refresh this, we see now that as we look in our post rules, that is now inherited. So if we look in shared, we have a shared rule, which is that rule we've now moved. And they can be moved around, so they can move up, down into different device groups. You can clone into different device groups. So if you want to clone objects across device groups, you can. Rules across device groups, you can. But that just gives you an idea of the whole device group hierarchy. Now, if we want to preview the rules as they're going to be seen on the device, so obviously we know now within our security we've got pre-rules, we've got post rules, we've got default rules, and we know which device group we're in. Now when we look at the firewall, what we want to do is we want to be able to see on the firewall where that will be constructed, because on the firewall we have no concept of those rules. In fact, if I just log into this firewall here, this gives us a much better view of what we were saying. So we've got the rules in here. This hasn't been pushed out yet, by the way, but we see on here we've got the rules. So we've got the pre-rules. We know these are our default rules, and these are our post rules, and they're all in that order. If we want to preview it on here, go to preview rules. We want to look at the security rule base, we can look at the other rule bases as well. For the HA test group, and we can see that we've got our allow HTTP and the block SSH, which are those two there. And that's how it's going to be evaluated. So the evaluation of the rules is going to be the shared or parent group pre-rules. Then we have the device group pre-rules. In the middle of that, you'll have any rules that are local to the firewall, because you can put rules locally on the firewall as well. And then after that, you have the device group post rules. You have the parent group or shared group in this instance post rules. And then we have the default rules. And that's how the rule base is evaluated. So essentially, you're looking at pre-rules for if you need to enforce the traffic, if the traffic has to be enforced, and you're not going to allow anybody to change that further down. And then we have post rules, where you can add post rules in, and those rules then are going to be applied should the traffic not match anything above it. So that gives you the chance to add stuff to the rule base. The local rules is going to be, again, the pre-rules are always going to be they're always going to be evaluated first. So then if you've got local rules, they'll go in and then they'll get hit before you end up on the post rules. Okay, so that's that. So if I now commit that to Panorama, and again, as we know, so we've committed that to Panorama, and that just means that now I've committed this configuration to Panorama, and we are going to then push it to the device. Okay, so that's now committed. And now to push that to our devices, we're going to push it to the device. And here we can look at, we can edit selections. If we have multiple device groups, we can see what we're going to push in this push, and we can look at our templates. At the minute, we know that our device group is out of sync because we know we've changed the rules that are in that device group. That's going to be different to the rules that were there before. And we're going to click OK. And we can validate it, so we can run a dummy push first just to see if that's okay. If now the configuration we've got is valid, that's actually a valid configuration. And we can select no default selections. That simply removes that. So by default, when you come to this screen, unless you've got that selected, you'll see all of the device groups that are out of sync, and you can push to all those. But then you could end up in a situation where you're pushing other people's changes, potentially, depending upon your administrative model. Okay, but now we're going to push it, and that will push that out to our firewall. So whilst that's doing that, let's have a quick talk about the device groups themselves and the hierarchies. So essentially, as we said before, we've got the shared group, that's at the top. That is, you can't erase it, you can't move it. And the temptation is to put all your objects into shared. It's probably best off to be avoided, because everything that goes in shared has to be inherited by absolutely everything underneath it. So if I add, so this is going to be my test group 1. Say very little in the way of originality. So that's now under the shared group. So everything that goes in shared is going to be inherited by the test group. That's because that's underneath there. If I was to move the test group, so let's say I move the test group, this is its parent device group here. If I was to move the test group 1, so its parent device group is HA test group, that can be done as well. And then as we can see, that's now moved underneath. So now you'd have everything from shared would be inherited, but also because I'm nested now underneath HA test group, I would inherit from there. You can reverse this inheritance. You can push it up from the other way. I don't know necessarily why you would, because I find this the most logical way of doing it. Quick look across the top here. We got a description. That's fairly self-explanatory. We have a description for it. We have a software version. So if you have a software version that's applied to these, it will show there. User ID information, which is going to be which firewall within a device group are you going to have user ID information from. We'll talk about that in a minute as well. And then the devices that are in there and the reference templates. Okay, you can put the current limit is 1024 firewalls within a device group. And that's a limit. And that's device groups essentially. They can be moved in and out. Again, if we was to create another one, if we was to create do that properly, test group 2. So let's do a test group 2, and we wanted that in shared as its parent. Then you can see now we create another hierarchy. So if we had test group 3, and that's going to be its parent is going to be test group 2, then we have another separate hierarchy then taking place. You have a separate inheritance model taking place. Okay, so that's device groups sort of as they are. So now we're going to look a bit further into the options for the device groups and how that goes together, and how we can start to build up from the device groups and start to really leverage that device group capability. So now, once we've got our device groups, we understand our device groups, how does that work with firewalls and putting firewalls into it? Well, in the first instance, if you're bringing in a firewall, if you're importing a firewall into Panorama that contains its own configuration, as you import that firewall, it will come in with its own policies and objects, and that will become its own device group, at which point you can either move it into a nested group like this by changing its parent group, or you can leave it with shared as its parent group. The devices or virtual systems that are in the device groups is what we're more interested in here. So a firewall, a single vSys firewall, like majority of firewalls, can only be in one device group. However, multi-vSys firewalls, which are multiple virtual systems contained within a single firewall, each vSys can be assigned into a different device group. So you could have vSys 1 in HA test group, and you could have vSys 2 in test group 1, and so on. vSys 3 in test group 2, and vSys 4 in test group 3. Okay, and that's a perfectly legitimate way of doing it. So once it's in there, we need to understand a few things that we can do with regard to the device groups, and one of them is the user ID information. So if, for instance, I have my PAVM firewall is connected to LDAP, it's also able to pick up user ID mappings from either a user ID firewall, a VM that's running as a user ID, so that's looking at the logon events and everything on an AD server, and then that's able to determine which usernames are with which IPs. If I'm doing that, when I go to create my policies, within the policy, if I say go to here, so as a source user, it wouldn't drop down there, so I wouldn't be able to see any source users in there. So the best way of demonstrating that, so if we want to go to allow internet, okay, and then we've got source and we've got inside zone new. If I want to add another zone to that, as a drop down, I have only internet zone new, and that is because the firewall that's in now has been subject to a commit and it's been pushed, and in that firewall, that firewall has attached to it this template stack. So all the settings in there now are available within that device group to drop down, because it's referencing the templates to get to that network centric configuration. So let's say, just as a demonstration, if I wanted to add new zones template, okay, because we're going to create some new zones or some such thing, and I'm going to go to it and I'm going to select our new zones template, and so now the configurations that I make here are going to be reflected only in this new zones template. So this is going to be demo zone 1, it's going to be layer 3, okay, and then we are going to add demo zone 2. It's also going to be layer 3. Click add. Okay, so now that that's in there, we can see that we've got these demo zone 1 and 2. And again, even though that has been created and that exists, if we go to the allow internet, we still don't have those as a drop down option. However, if within that device group I add our new zones to reference templates, and then I come back to our policies, go to allow internet, source, and then we're going to add. You can see now we've got our demo zone 1 and 2. And that is because I've now given it that reference template. So the reference templates are very important in that respect. They help you in a big way. You don't have to import a firewall into a device group to get the network configurations from that firewall. And although they're not here, it is actually best practice to keep all the templates that you're going to require within a device group, keep them as reference templates, making the construction of policies a lot easier further down the line. With user ID information, it's the same thing. Basically, let's just say that my PAVM has got the user ID information. Then I can go to there and I can select my PAVM, and then every time within that drop down, that's going to reference the PAVM. It's going to get the information from there, and I'm going to have pre-populated list of all of the users and the user groups that are contained within that PAVM. That can then be used across all devices that are in this device group. Okay, so Spares you the spares you the thing of putting the firewall in, because that's covered in another video. If you want to know how to put firewalls into Panorama, there's other videos on my channel. However, so where we are now is we have the firewall in. I'm just going to push this to the devices just to bring them into sync, so you'll see that they're in sync. And now we're going to discuss the way that we then build up the policies and the use of targets to target specific devices within a device group. There are two ways of doing this. If you have something that is going to be consistent across all your firewalls, you could create the same firewall and they could all reference the same objects. However, if you're going to create something that, say, DIAs in different locations, they're going to have different objects, different LAN addresses and things like this. Also different NAT addresses, based on the fact that they will need to have a different IP at the front end, because they're going to, and then you may need to NAT. Your typical overload NAT would be different at the front end. So just check that's going through. Okay, so first and easiest one to describe really with regard to the targets is the NAT rule. So a NAT rule here is targeting, as we can see, it's targeting PAVM. So it's 192.168.0.24/24. That's the network, that's the IP address and the network of the ETH11, which is where we're going to be doing all our NATing. However, on PAVM2, that interface is 192.168.20.24. But because they're in the same device group, if I alter that there, and they're in, and I target all firewalls, then I'll have the same IP address on both, which of course doesn't work particularly well. As we can see in here at the minute, there is no NAT policy, because the only policy that's been pushed down in the device group is to PAVM. Okay, I'm just going to check that once more. Okay, that's all done now. So if we just check and make sure that our firewalls are in sync, that's always a good place to start when your firewalls are in sync, based on the fact that you now know anything you do going forward, when you push it, that's what you're going to be pushing. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to create a NAT rule. I'm going to create a NAT rule that is going to be targeted specifically just against PAVM2, and we're going to do it very easily. So what we'll do is we'll take this one, we'll clone this one. It gives us the name of the rule, PAVM, because we know that one's going to be used for PAVM exclusively within this device group. And then where it is, it's in the HA test group. We know it's in the HA test group, it says there. The destination is HA test group. We're not moving it into anywhere else. We're going to be retaining it within the same device group. We're just going to target a different firewall within that group. And then we're going to put it after the internet NAT rule for this internet NAT rule here. Now, this rule will get pushed to PAVM. The next rule we create, this rule that we're creating now, that will get pushed to PAVM2. So they're both valid rules. So in this instance, if you like, the order of operations, so the order of a firewall sort of from top down, doesn't mean that there'll be no NAT on PAVM2, because it will match PAVM. So we have to make that distinction. Okay, so we're going to go for the pre-rule base, which is good because that's where we are. And we're going to go OK. Right, so now we're in there and we've got a clone of that rule. And so I'm simply going to put this right here, PAVM2. Okay, translated packet is what we're interested in. Because our firewall has come in, it's still got all of its templates, and it's got all of its interface configuration and other configurations. Within the device group, we have this as a drop down. We have 2024, which is the IP address of our PAVM2. And then for the active, what we're going to do there, for the target, sorry, for this PAVM2, we're going to deselect PAVM. It automatically selects any, so that would then push it to all target devices. But we're going to select PAVM2. Okay, active-active binding is something different for active-active firewalls. Okay. So now, even though it's decided that it's going to move it off, so now we can see quite clearly that our PAVM is going to get this rule. Now PAVM2 is going to get that rule. If I commit that to Panorama, so. Okay, that's now committed, and now we're going to push this to the devices. And just to show, so we're going to edit the selections and just see what we're actually looking at. So both of them are out of sync. Our templates are in sync because we haven't made any changes to that. So we are going to hit OK, and we're going to push. Okay, so now that's completed, so that's pushed, and so we can see now we've got our rules represented here. And if we look at PAVM, just refresh this because obviously we need to check. Still got the same rule there. And on PAVM2, when we refresh this, we've now got our NAT rule there. So that way, if you've got 1, 2, 4, 8, whatever amount of devices in there, you can now control through the targets which device within that device group, or VSys, again, a VSys becomes part of a device group, you can push whichever you want to the rule or whatever to. So in our device groups as well, we can say we need to create objects, obviously, so we have an object. So with objects, there's the shared objects, of course, which everybody inherits. These are unoverridable, you can't override them within the test group, so I can't click on this and then override because nothing happens. However, if I had several under here, so I've got my HA test group, okay, and then test group 1, so I can have different layers of groups. If I add an entry in here, so I'm going to call this my demo entry, because as we all know I have no imagination. 23.23.23, okay, so that's a slash state, so that's a host address. I'm not going to put it in shared, and I'm not going to disable the override. If I put that in there now, okay, so I now have got that in HA test group. So if I go to a child group of HA test group, I have the same entry, but I'm able to override it. So if you have multiple firewalls within a group, you can't, using this method, you can't override between the firewalls themselves. So for instance, if we were to look at it this way, in the device groups, so I couldn't override a value between there and there. However, if these were stacked the other way down, so if PAVM2 was in our test group 1, it would inherit everything from here, and then I could override it within that group. But what I can do is I can override it here. So I can say, okay, HA test group, I want to override this in test group 1, demo entry, and then I'm going to create that 24.24.24.24. Okay, and now when I commit in my test group 1, the value is that, and in my HA test group I've got that value there. So you can build up multiples across multiple device groups. That's the inheritance model, essentially. If we create a policy, so for instance, if we were to create a policy within HA test group, so we got this is our policies, here we got security policies there, HA test group, we know that's in the HA test group, we know that's come from shared, so test group 1 is going to inherit all of the rules from there. So if I was to create in here a rule, reference rule, okay, show the difference between device groups referencing the same object. Hey, same object. Okay, so I do that now. So if I want to go from source, and I'm going to go from, say, inside zone to internet zone. Okay, and the source address, let's say the source address is going to be my demo address. Demo entry. Any application defaults, I'm going to allow it. Okay, now I can select a target for that here. Again, the same one, I can select it either to be on PAVM or PAVM2, but I'm going to put this to all targets within the device group for this example. So I've now added that entry there, and if we look at this entry here, we can see the entry now is 23, 23, 23, 23. However, because I have the same object name, but with a different value referenced in test group 1, when I look at the same rule in test group 1, the value for it is 24, 24, 24, 24. So you can override as you go down. Anything that's from shared, that will get the shared value regardless. But anything that is from a parent group will get, you can override, so you can have your local, because that exists locally. So the rule will work because, so if I do a commit now, I won't get any validation errors. The rule will work because you've got a global rule that references a global value, a global object. So if you had LAN, for instance, then, and you wanted everybody in your LAN to go to the internet, LAN is a different value depending on site, but that rule would then work because each device group underneath that would have a different value for LAN. And there's no issue with it. It's all fine. I can even push that to the devices, which will go to both of our devices at the minute. So this really, in a way, is sort of the same kind of idea as the templates idea with the variables, because what we could do, if we wanted to, just a little aside, if we look in the templates, so this firewall now has been created with these templates and it's overridden. So where we have an override to change the IP address, for instance, we could do it that way, or we could use variables. So if we take one that has a variable in it, so demo zone protection, for instance, so if I go to network demo zone protection, okay, so if I wanted to create let's create an interface and have an IP. So let's say we have a let's say that we need to create an interface E3. It's going to be a layer 3. It'll inherit that. So, and then we need to create an IPv4 address for it. But we know that this template exists in both stacks. So this template exists in this firewall, and this template exists in this firewall. Hit new variable as opposed to that. Create it. So demo IP. Initialize it with any random value, doesn't have to be any value in particular. Click OK again. Okay, now if we come back to demo zone protection, we can see that we have that variable and we have the value for it. We also see that it exists in here and it exists in here. Now, because it exists in there, what we have to do is we have to override it, which we can do. So in here, we can say I want to override this. And my IP in here is, let's say, 9.9.9. Okay, that'll be the value that PAVM gets. I'm going to override this here. Okay, and that will be the value that our PAVM2 gets. That way you're creating you have the options of variabilizing. You can create the variables and then you can add the variables wherever they are. And then if the next firewall that comes in and you add demo zone protection to it, it will get that IP again. So that simplifies the configuration for both the device groups and for templates. So I'm going to commit that. Okay, now that's committed. So we're going to push the devices, and this is where we see the difference again. So we can see that we're pushing to the stacks, PAVM, PAVM2. No mention of the device group because that's not been altered in any way, shape. And then we can see we've got the templates there. So push the template values out. Okay, and just to further, so that's now been pushed out to the devices. So if we go to PAVM, we can see that our Ethernet 1.3, which is the one we configured, has got the value of 9999. If we go to PAVM2, we can see that that's got the value of 7777. So that's the variables kind of sort of in a nutshell. So what we'll do now is we'll just do show a little bit of the command line and how to verify some of this, and then that's the end of the video. So please like and comment, and if there's anything you saw that's wrong or whatever, just let me know. Please like and subscribe because it does help, and the next video we'll do is going to be the HIP profiles, because that was the other one on the thing. But of course we can get further into sort of deeper things as well. But we'll have a look at the command line. Okay, so we're on our secondary active now. I'm going to do a show device groups. You click that. Okay, so this now is showing us all our device groups that are in the firewall. We can see that test group 3 has just got a shared policy and there's nothing underneath it. And if we just follow this all the way through to the bottom, we can see that 2 and 1 are exactly the same. And then we've got PAVM2, which is the group that initially came in with PAVM2. That's now just empty and there's no configuration in it. However, what we're interested in really is we're interested in seeing our HA test group, because this is the group we've been working with, and we can see that we have the firewalls that are connected. We've got the serial number of the firewall that's connected. We have the IP address of the firewall that's connected. Yes, that it's connected. Commit succeeded with warnings. There was warnings on the last commit. The wildfire. Last shared policy validate all state was none because there wasn't a validate all done or validate all updated. There wasn't one done there. VPN disable mode, no, so that isn't disabled. Shared policy version, shared policy MD5 sum, and so on. It gives you an idea, looking at it, what's in the groups, and an idea of what firewalls you have in what different groups. There's another way of doing it as well. If I just pop that down, so you can go on the dashboard, and you'll see there is a list of device groups and the count of the firewalls that are in it, as well as if you hover over here, you can also get some information about it's gone now. Some information about the device groups and the device itself, greater than the device itself. Then if we want to see the templates, they're on the box, they're on the device. So template stack, and then we can do the same again. Name, or if we want to see all of them, then we can see all the stacks that are on there and the templates that are in the stacks. You can see the templates there. And so we can also see as well, so if we change this, so set CLI config output format set, and we go to configure mode. So we can do a show template stack, and then what we'll see is we'll see this, but we'll see in the set function, the set command for the template stacks. So this is where the template stacks are configured. This is how we add the device. So we add it as a device to the template stack. That's by serial number. And then we've also got in here as well, we've got the template stack and the firewall stack and the templates that are in it, which as we saw before is the zones and protection network template. You'll notice that's got double quotes around it, and that's because there's a gap in the middle. There's a space in the middle, so that's to escape the white space. Hostname template, combination templates, we know those are the ones that are in there. We know they're the same as the ones that are here. Apart from this one has PAVM2, because this came in afterwards, so it's retained its own template as well. And we can also see as well we've got the variables. So if we wanted to alter a variable here, we would alter it using that command. So if we just do that now, just as a demo. So if we go set template stack, and then the stack name, which we can pull from here, and then variable, and then the variable name. It's just right there, and then we should be able to get type, IP, net mask, and let's say we want to change it to 8.8.8. We can do that, and then next time we run that command, we've got 8.8.8, and then we can do a commit to Panorama, and then that's committed, and we can see that represented. So you can delete the stacks, you can move the stacks around, you can alter the firewalls that are in stacks from the command line as well. So that's device groups. Any questions? Again, please, questions, comments. It's all good. It's all a learning experience for everybody. Again, I hate to keep pushing it, but please like and subscribe. If you've made it this far to the end of the video, well done, because you don't usually make it this. People don't usually make it this far through to the videos. I'll do the HIP one next. The HIP host information profiles. Do that next and show how we can control things based on compliance, and then we'll move on to maybe another poll or what else we can put in.